Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, How High School Liaisons and Their Designees Help Homeless Youth Fill Out the FAFSA, Steps, Guidance, and Best Practices. As we are waiting for folks trickling in, we'd love if people want to share in the chat their name and where they're coming from. Again, this is our webinar on how high school liaisons and their designees can help homeless youth fill out the FAFSA, talking about steps, guidance, and best practices. Again, just in the chat, share your name, where you're coming from. Love to see who is all joining us today. And I also have to say, I apologize not having my camera on today. I got a concussion over the weekend. So I am in a dark room and just want to say I'm sorry that my camera's not on, but we see Karen here, my colleague, and we are going to get started in just a little bit. But as we are seeing folks trickle in, just in the chat, sharing your name, where you're coming from, and we'll go ahead and get started here. If you aren't familiar with Schoolhouse Connection, here is a little bit about us. We are a national nonprofit based in DC with a mission to overcome homelessness through education from prenatal to post-secondary education. We provide strategic advocacy and practical assistance, and we work with many schools, early childhood programs, higher ed institutions, students, families, and youth. So here's a little bit more about us and our newsletter. Today, we're going to talk about the role of McKinney-Vento liaisons and the FAFSA. So they have very particular roles with working with students for the FAFSA. We're going to talk about some best practices on how McKinney-Vento liaisons can designate school staff to help with the FAFSA, to help with determinations. This was a new change that happened with FAFSA simplification. And then we'll talk about some of our resources that we have to better help with clear referral systems to designate folks, to provide those determinations and have those clear referrals. So we're all connected with the McKinney-Vento liaison and those resources. But to kickstart us off, here's just our agenda. My name is Jillian Sitar. I'm the Director of Higher Education Partnerships at Schoolhouse. Kieran, you want to say hi briefly?
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you today. I'm Karen Rice. I'm the Senior Program Manager of Education Initiatives at Schoolhouse.
Amazing. So we love seeing everyone here in the chat coming from all different places across the country. So cool, so awesome. This is a quick little webinar. You will get a copy of this PowerPoint and the recording later. So if you want to take notes, fantastic, but you will get all these materials sent to you. We're going to do a quick reminder of what the definitions are, so we're all on the same page when we're talking about homelessness on the FAFSA. We are going to talk really briefly about the 24-25 FAFSA, talk about some best practices and some resources. So again, making sure we're all on the same page. When we're talking about homeless youth, we're talking very specifically about unaccompanied homeless youth, or unaccompanied youth who are at risk of homelessness and self-supporting. So unaccompanied, meaning, you're not in the physical custody of a legal parent or guardian. Homeless, using that McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness, lacking a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. And then self-supporting and at risk of homelessness, this is where things get a little bit more gray. We have here, it's when a student's paying for their own living expenses, including that fixed, regular, and adequate housing, and the student's housing may cease to be fixed, regular, and adequate. So for example, a student who is being evicted and they've been unable to find housing. So that's kind of what that examples are. But we recognize that some things aren't always so clearly black and white. And so we're always happy to help kind of navigate if you ever have questions about if a student meets that definition of an unaccompanied homeless youth or an unaccompanied youth who is at risk of homelessness and self-supporting. So again, unaccompanied homeless youth, they are considered independent students on the FAFSA. That means they do not need to include parental information on the FAFSA, which is super important. And it also just makes sense. If they're not in that legal physical custody of a parent or guardian, we don't expect them to include parental information on the FAFSA. Now, for students who are experiencing homelessness with their families, they can 100% still fill out the FAFSA. They just wouldn't answer yes to the homeless question on the FAFSA, but they will, again, just fill out as instructed. And we encourage those students to still reach out to their financial aid to see if there's other aid or other resources that are available to all students experiencing homelessness. So now I'm going to turn it over to Karen to talk through the specific pieces on McKinney-Vento liaisons and their FAFSA and their responsibilities.
So we wanted to take a few minutes to just remind you all again of what some of the requirements are under McKinney-Vento, specifically when it comes to talking about the FAFSA. So first of all, we need to make sure that our liaisons are ensuring that unaccompanied homeless youth are informed of their status as an independent student for the FAFSA. Again, as Jillian mentioned, so that they can complete that FAFSA without parent or guardian information. And so we know that with some of the FAFSA changes and the idea that there can be designees, that it's really important to make sure that that training piece is in place for those designees, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but also for all school staff, because we know that sometimes students may not come forward with their living situation and may not share their living situation until they're starting to think about some of their options for FAFSA and for post-secondary planning. So we want to make sure that as liaisons, we're training all school staff on McKinney-Vento, so that if a student shares with a counselor or a teacher or another school staff member or another designee what their living situation is, that that person knows exactly who to contact and who to reach out to and how to make that referral to the homeless liaison, not only for FAFSA purposes, but also to make sure that that student has what they need to be successful. So of course, we know that homelessness can look like so many different things. And so our youth in particular may be really hesitant to share their living situation, especially those who are unaccompanied, who might be sleeping on someone's couch or moving around between different places. They may be really hesitant to share what that living situation looks like. And so they don't come forward with that until they are at that point where they're completing the FAFSA and don't have access to their parent information. So we want to make sure that they have those determinations that they need to verify that they meet that definition of an unaccompanied youth. And so as I mentioned, that under the FAFSA simplification, McKinney-Vento liaisons can now designate other people to provide those determinations of that student's unaccompanied status.
Thank you, Karen. And that's really important to note. And so in this line graph, we are seeing unaccompanied homeless youth determinations by school district liaisons across many, many years. So if you notice, there's a really big jump there in between the 15 and 16 year, or 16 and 17 year rather, because in 2016, FAFSA amendments went into effect in the Every Student Succeeds Act that said that exact piece that Karen said earlier, that McKinney-Vento liaisons are required to inform unaccompanied homeless youth about their independent student status. And because of that change in that law, there was that huge bump, that huge increase of 14%, which is fantastic. We were so happy to see so many students filling out the FAFSA, getting their determinations. And then we started seeing a little trickle and kind of a big jump. And we all know kind of what was happening in 2020, the pandemic. So the determinations had a huge dive over the last few years because of the pandemic, because so many students decided maybe they weren't going to college or they weren't getting identified in the high schools or, a variety of other reasons. But we are happy to see that the most recent data from the Department of Education shows that there's a little bit of an increase that has happened in the 2022-2023 application cycle. So it's still, a little bump, but we are not back to our pre-pandemic numbers. We're still at about a 13% decline from pre-pandemic. And we really are hopeful that with all these new changes from FAFSA simplification, with the fact that McKinney-Vento liaisons can now designate other people, we will continue to see a trend now that more folks like counselors or social workers or other people at the high school can provide determinations, and it's not all just falling on the McKinney-Vento liaison to do so. So we're going to do a quick poll right now. Let me make sure I have the poll up and ready. We are curious if you have currently designated other staff to provide unaccompanied homeless youth determinations. So let me launch that right now. And we recognize that our some folks that are joining us, they might not be a McKinney-Vento liaison. I think we saw some people from colleges joining, which is fantastic to see. And then we'll wait a few more seconds. We got about 50% people, and then we'll end the poll in just a little bit. All right, I'm gonna end the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so we'll share the results here. All right, so it looks like we have a good amount of folks, again, joining us who are not the liaison. Some people have not done so. Some people have. So that's great. About 25% of people who responded said they have already designated other people. Fantastic. And then we have about 12% people said they haven't, but they will now. So hopefully this was some already good information to know that you can now designate other people. We got one more poll here. And all right. Let's see. Is this launched? Oh, stop sharing. Okay. We're going to launch this next question. We are curious if your students have been asked by financial aid offices to provide determination letters already. So if folks are aware, the FAFSA was delayed by many, many, many months, and then schools didn't get the FAFSAs for many, many, many months. And just kind of like right now, schools are starting to reach out to students to say, okay, we processed your FAFSA. We see that you said you are an unaccompanied homeless youth. Do we have your determination letter? So we're just curious to see if that has happened because, school is about to end. I was just asking Karen, when's your kid's last day of school? And it's in June. And so we have such a short amount of time for students to submit their FAFSAs, and schools have been asking for enrollment fees. A lot of schools, this was their deadline. May 1st was so many schools' deadline of making sure that you have your enrollment fees paid for. And it's been really challenging, especially for our students who might not have the capabilities to pay for multiple enrollment fees and hold their spots in line. All right, I'm going to end the poll here and share with everyone what we are seeing. Okay, let me do share results. All right, so we have about a majority of us said you're unsure. And that's what we were expecting. Sometimes, we provide determinations and then we don't really know what's happening on the other end. 38% have said yes. So that's encouraging to hear. In the chat, if you are one of those people that said yes, do you know if you're, okay, so let me rephrase that. If you're one of the people who said, yes, I have designated someone else to provide determinations, and the school has also asked for those determinations, have you received any pushback from financial aid administrators since you are not a McKinney-Vento liaison or you were a designee? So if that has happened to you, let us know in the chat. We're all learning here since there's such many new processes with the 24-25 FAFSA. So just am curious if you want to share your experiences so far. Great for letting us know. I'm going to head back to the PowerPoint now to talk through kind of like what we are saying are some best practices for referrals. Because as Karen was mentioning, sometimes we aren't aware that a student is an unaccompanied homeless youth or meets, the definition until we're actually helping a student with the FAFSA. So how can we ensure that all these folks are being connected to the McKinney-Vento liaison?
So we wanted to offer these considerations when we're really thinking about who to designate as that as that designee for the FAFSA verification. And so these are a few considerations as you're thinking about it. For those of you who are McKinney-Vento liaisons, you might want to consider some of these different pieces of that. So how many people am I designating as being able to provide that FAFSA verification? Do I have a list of those people? And most importantly, are they trained in McKinney-Vento? Because we don't want people making decisions about unaccompanied youth if they don't really understand what that means, right? So we want to make sure that we're providing specific training for those staff members. So that might really look like, what is that above and beyond what I provide for all staff that I'm specifically giving to these designees to make sure that they understand and know the process to do that? And so when we talk about training all staff, and we mentioned that in one of our previous slides. I think it's also good to consider what additional training do we need to provide specifically about unaccompanied youth to our designees. We also want to make sure, of course, that those folks are trained on FAFSA requirements and kind of that overlap and intersection between our unaccompanied youth as they're applying for the FAFSA. I think it's really important to consider kind of what that process is, that when you look at a designee who might be identifying a student for their FAFSA verification, making sure that that makes its way back to you as the liaison for those of you who are liaisons, and really looking at what that referral process looks like. Now, I will say in general, I would encourage you, for those of you who are liaisons, to think about that for all school staff, but it's really important, particularly for this, because if there's someone that's making a determination about an unaccompanied youth designation, that we want to make sure that that student is also receiving their services and supports under McKinney-Vento. So it's not just exclusive to their FAFSA verification. We also know that for data collection purposes and to make sure that we have accurate data, that information needs to get put into our district or LEA student information system. And so there really needs to be that tight process of, if a designee is identifying a student and saying, yep, you are eligible to complete the FAFSA as an independent student, you are an unaccompanied homeless youth, that there's that process that makes its way back to the liaison so that the liaison has the information to update the student information system and keep that accurate data records. And then, like I said, go through the process of making sure that that student has access to all of their rights and services under the law. So we wanted to really make sure to emphasize that point, because one of the things that we've heard is that there's sometimes a disconnect between the person who's working with a student on the FAFSA and really working through that verification, that the information is not making its way back to the liaison. And that's really a problem in terms of making sure that we can support that student with our other services. And so we also want to make sure that our data is accurate, of course, because that all gets reported to the Department of Education. So it's really important to think through, what does your process look like? So when you're considering who those designees might be, thinking through how you connect with that person, what your relationship looks like. Are you meeting regularly? Do you have a process in place? Are you physically located near each other where it's easy to talk and to connect? Or what is your process going to look like? And so Jillian is going to share with you a tool that we have created to help maybe expedite and facilitate this process between the designee and the liaison.
Thank you, Karen. So again, these are just all best practices and tools that we've created at Schoolhouse to hopefully help you better do your job. You do not have to use them at all, but we've heard really great things, and our numbers show that people are downloading them and are intrigued. Number one, you might have seen this already. This is our sample form for unaccompanied homeless youth determination. So again, if you're a McKinney-Vento liaison or a designee or an authorized entity, you can provide a unaccompanied homeless youth determination. So I'm going to bear with me as I click out of this and show you. It'll bring you to basically this page, or it'll bring you to a page, and then you go and click on your FAFSA determination for 2024. So this is a Google Doc, and this is a template. So notice here, it says request edit access. We do not want you to do that. We get hundreds of emails a week of people trying to request this document, but this is just a template for everyone to view and to see. So what you want to do is go to File, Download, and Word document. So you can have your own copy of this. So this is just a template for people to use. Do not request edit access for us. Go to File, Download, Word document, and then you will get your own editable copy for this. We did make a change. So you can see here, we put this spot that says school district liaison, and then we added or designee of the liaison. So if you are designated, you can write the school district liaison here, because we were worried that we were going to get some pushback from financial aid administrators saying, hey, you're just a case manager, you're just a counselor, you're not an authorized entity. Where's your McKinney-Vento liaison? Did they sign off on this? So we wanted to make it as seamless as possible and just use everything all on the same form. So we updated it the last few weeks. So it's all on this one page. And again, File, Download, Word document, not request edit access. So that is one piece we wanted to share with y'all. And then the second resource is our FAFSA referral form template. So I'm actually going to go back to this page. You'll get a copy of this PowerPoint, so you will see it. This is a new resource we created last week. And this is a FAFSA referral form. So again, if counselors, liaison, designees, any school staff that are helping students fill out the FAFSA, if they learn that a student is an unaccompanied homeless youth and they want to let their McKinney-Vento liaison know, like, hey, this person wasn't identified, but meets this definition, we created this FAFSA referral form to inform the McKinney-Vento liaison so they can provide the students with all sorts of supports, whether it's transportation, free meals, resource connections, and again, want to make sure that they're inputting this information in the student information system so that can be appropriately captured, all the numbers and everything. So what we have here is a form. So you would go to download the FAFSA referral template. It'll ask you to make a copy of the FAFSA referral form. So I'm going to say, yes, make a copy here. So we have a copy of this FAFSA referral form. This is, again, just a template, but this is your template now. So you can then edit it. And I do want to say that you need to have a Google email address to be able to copy and make a template. And so it's really easy. We have, you put the staff name, we put the student's first and last name. If you are a McKinney-Vento liaison that works with a lot of different schools, you can edit this and put all the different schools so you know what school the student is coming from. We're asking about the student's living situation, again, making sure that they meet the definition of an unaccompanied homeless youth. And then, want to make sure they're an unaccompanied homeless youth, so asking if they are not with their legal parent or guardian. And then, again, confirming that they are an independent student and that they're getting their determination. So you can edit this as much detail as you want. We just have this set up, pretty basic, good information here. And additionally, we wanted to show that you can make it so that when you get the responses from, the emails, you can make it so that you get an email from every time someone fills out the form. I'm trying to find where that is. And again, y'all, I got a concussion, so things are not working in my brain as well as they normally do. But there are definitely settings here for you to get an email notification once someone fills out the form. So it should be, again, very easy. It's just thank you. It's under responses and then the ellipses. Perfect. Okay. Again, the brain's not working today right now. So you need to have a Google account to make a template, to make a copy of this template. If you are a school, because we know that many schools aren't able to utilize Google, there's some technology, some blocking situations. We have a option for you to download the form in PDF form so you can at least see the questions, so you can make your own form in whatever process that you have. So hopefully that will be easy for you to make once you can again see all those questions. But if you have a Google account, you can just easily make a copy, which should be really helpful for you all to just have, again, clear referral processes for folks. So I'm going to turn it over and see if there were any questions in the chat. We have about 5 minutes left. Let me pause for a second and see what we got here. Okay, so Kaylin, hopefully you saw what the determination letter looked like. That was the Google Doc that I shared, and we'll send a copy of this PowerPoint and in the emails too. We can link to that. So I think someone also mentioned something about putting your letterhead. Yes, you can 100% put your letterhead on top of the determination letter. That is perfect as well. And then Amber, let me see your question here. And if you have questions, please put it in the Q&A part so we can capture everything. Amber saying, as a former unaccompanied homeless youth in high school, so that Amber's not a liaison. They are a resource specialist for their FG community. with several students in college who have experience in the child welfare system, such as foster care, homeless youth, interested in creating or being able to write determinations for my youth starting college. Okay, so yeah, it sounds like I think since you might not be considered an authorized entity to be able to provide those determinations, unfortunately. So if all of these students, if they were in high school, their school district liaison should be able to provide those determinations for students right away. So they shouldn't receive any pushback from financial aid administrators. Things get a little bit tricky once students are in college and maybe don't have access to determinations from their school district liaisons, or they weren't in shelters or a TRIO or GARRET program, or for the foster youth, if they aren't connected with all the foster youth authorized entities that can provide determinations. If that is the case, the onus would then fall on the financial aid administrator to make these determinations. This is one of the new changes that happened in FAFSA Simplification Act. It was always guidance, but now it is codified, it is in the law. This should be happening, that financial aid administrators should be doing all of these things. And so Amber, as a person who is working with these students, you can definitely help as an advocate to help inform financial aid administrators about these new changes. You can provide students with resources that we have at Schoolhouse, so that when they are meeting with the financial aid administrator, they know exactly what to say, and they aren't going the route of a provisional independent student and having to provide 3 letters of support. So those are just things that you can do to help out. I'm seeing a few other questions that are popping up. Any idea about the 25-26 FAFSA determination template will be ready? So usually we have that ready by, I think, like September, October. So before the FAFSA is available, which for 25-26, we are not entirely sure when the FAFSA will be available. So time will tell. But Cassandra, we'll try to get that ready by around September, so you can have all those determinations ready for students. I do just want to, show some key takeaways as we close out. And if you have questions, feel free to still keep adding them to our Q&A part. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, McKinney-Vento liaisons can designate other staff members to provide unaccompanied homeless youth determinations, and that there should be really clear referral systems set in place, whether you're using, our own FAFSA template that I just shared, or you want to create your own. But we want to make sure that if unaccompanied homeless youth are being identified and they're receiving FAFSA determinations, that they're also receiving McKinney-Vento support if they aren't already connected to their McKinney-Vento liaison. Lastly, there's guidance from the Department of Education. This is the Dear Colleague letter that was sent out April of 2023, that basically just shows all these changes from FAFSA Simplification Act, what should be, that they are in effect now. Here are some of our resources. Folks have been asking, step-by-step directions on how to fill out students with the FAFSA. We talk about this here in this archived webinar from January 2024. We are just looking at the FAFSA question, but we have really great partnerships with John Burton Advocates for Youth. So definitely check out their resources. They go through the FAFSA step by step for both homeless youth and foster youth. It's like a 90-minute, 2-hour-long webinar. So please look at John Burton Advocates for Youth. They have a step-by-step how to fill out the 24-25 FAFSA. Really, really awesome resources there. And then, this is going to start playing the webinar. That's not what we want to see. Karen, you want to briefly talk about some art pieces and how that can be utilized too?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you that are not familiar with ARP-HCY funds, these were COVID relief dollars that came specifically designated to provide support to children and youth experiencing homelessness in light of some of the challenges from the pandemic. So I have dropped the link to the slides a couple of times in the chat, but this link to the official guidance that came out from the Department of Education. Essentially, we are very quickly approaching the end of the spending timeline for these funds. They need to be obligated by September 30th of 2024, so coming up very quickly. However, there is still time to use these funds to support students, particularly with those post-secondary transitions and those post-secondary plans. So I want to just highlight a couple of those uses for you so that you can maybe take those to your liaison or to the powers that be in your district who are making some of those funding decisions, because it is a really important and really, really helpful opportunity to be able to spend funds on those transitions. So thinking through, are there ways to provide stipends or at this point, the hiring process is not really happening for places, but to provide stipends or have others who can assist youth or assist parents and guardians with their completion of the FAFSA. There are many LEAs who have done FAFSA nights and who've brought in financial aid administrators, as well as others in the district to really provide that additional support. And so that can be funded through the ARP-HCY funds. Paying for any of those college application expenses like registration fees, placement exams, things like that. The graduation coach model is a really great model to use when we're talking about providing that support to our unaccompanied youth as they work toward graduation, helping them to keep on track toward graduation and then figure out those post-secondary plans. So again, in light of the fact that our timeline is very tight, we know that hiring a graduation coach is probably not feasible at this point, but there is the opportunity to pay stipends to counselors, to do things like transcript audits and to look at credits and to look at that progress toward graduation, and then really be talking with students and intentionally doing some of those plans around what those post-secondary plans will look like with students. Transcript audits are a really great way to help keep students on track toward graduation, and we would be happy to talk more about a model of what that could look like in a future webinar, or you're welcome to reach out to us after this and we can chat more about that as well. So just be thinking about those ARP-HCY funds and how you can really use this funding source to support your students as they're thinking about that transition. Again, funds need to be obligated by September 30th of 2024 and then spent down by January 30th of 2025. So the timeline is tight, but there definitely are still opportunities to be able to use funds to support students.
Thank you so much, Karen. Super important. Let's use those funds, everyone. And then lastly, we have our Schoolhouse Connection Scholarship. I believe the deadline is June 1st. So these are for students who are currently juniors right now and who will be attending college in 2025, or if you know any seniors who are taking a gap year, please check out our scholarship program. It is a really amazing, amazing opportunity. And then lastly, opportunities for you to connect with us. Here are all of our social media handles. And lastly, our contact information if you have other specific questions. I know this was a super, super quick webinar, but hopefully it gave you some resources. And again, you will get a copy of this PowerPoint, this recording. And thank you all so much for the work that you're doing. We know it's been a tough year. So thank you again, and we will see you all soon.